Grant, let's talk some Pelicans. I think it's probably time to have a brutally honest conversation about Zion Williamson, their overall direction, and where they go from here. Would you agree?
I mean, look, I feel like I've had a version of this once a year, probably. But this one feels different, I think, in a kind of concerning way, right?
Yeah. So Zion Williamson out indefinitely with a hamstring strain. The Pelicans have played, Grant, 401 regular season games since drafting him. That's quite a bit. Zion has appeared in 190 of those games. Put another way, he's missed more than 50% of the games he's eligible to play in. And that's not including any play-in or postseason contests, which he has not played in the actual postseason before. So that's sort of the red flag. And why is this injury different to me? My whole thing is, my view on Zion is this. I think at his peak, he is top 10, top 15 player in the league. I think he impacts the game to that extent. But we've gotten to the point, and maybe there were some missteps early on by both him and the Pelicans, the way he took care of his body, the latitude they gave him to kind of work away from the team. You can get into that. Everything we have heard, Shamit Dua in the know has been all over this. There's been Christian Clark has written about this. Zion has done a much better job over the past 2 years of taking care of his body, if you want to say getting more serious, and it's still just sort of betrayed him. And we've now been operating under this assumption that, well, you're eventually going to get peak Zion for an entire year once you get to the playoffs, and that's just your ticket to contending for something special. Again, that's how highly I view the peak Zion experience. And I don't think that this is all on him, or I don't even know how much to ascribe to him, his previous injury issues. However, we're kind of at the point, and some people may have already been there, where you do have to ask, can you continue to build your entire team around him? And then if the answer is no, what do you do? But also, whose fault? Is this just sort of freak accidents that we're here? Or is this, on the Pelicans for not doing a better job of actually optimizing Zion when they had him, because they were constantly waiting on seeing, could this dynamic between Brandon Ingram or the rest of the roster just work? And I think we should start there. Do you think they're at the point where they have to just face facts and say, it's not a matter of necessarily we need to trade Zion, but we can't count on him to be our primary tentpole moving forward?
I would say coming into the last 3 seasons prior to this one, that was kind of my take, was that one, I don't think that you can rely on him to stay healthy. And two, even if he does, he's such a weird, difficult player to build around that it just makes roster construction tricky. It makes relying on him tricky, because there's 2 versions of Zion. One is he's not available, and 2 is he can't shoot but needs the ball and is really good at that. But what do you do on both ends to support him best? And that's a hard question. I think we're probably there. I would parse the data a little thinner and say, yeah, he's played 190 games. I would make the case that 90 of those were evidence that, oh, this is a guy you build around. And talking about the 61 games of his second year when he averaged 27 and had shot 61% from the field, then missed the entire subsequent season and gave us 29 more games in 22-23 at 26 points a game, shot just over 60% from the field. That's 90 total games. Those are both all-star seasons. That's it. Before, his rookie year, played 24, was not at that level. Last year even was as healthy as he's ever been, 70 games, wasn't at that level. Averaged just under 23, not over 60% from the field. And that's an insane bar, right? 60% from the field. But if you don't shoot threes and you actually don't get to the line as much as someone like him probably should, still has just under 8 attempts a game. That's good. But if you're not at that level, those 90 games I'm talking about for Zion, then you can't make that guy your be all end all. He's not available enough, and he's not quite good enough and throw the defense and rebounding stuff in there too. We're just talking offense to this point, to make him the guy you can build around in a way that feels stable, or feels like you can make a 3 to 5 year plan. I just don't see how that works from a decision-making standpoint. And look, all the other injuries up and down the roster just make it
yeah.
Who knows? Who knows what this would have looked like if he'd been healthy? But you know what I mean? I think it's just the 2-pronged thing, the unavailability and the the uniqueness of his game is just, that's always been the case, right? He's always been a hard guy to build around. Now it just may be like, we got to stop trying.
So I think that's where it will diverge, is because I would agree. They have to stop trying, because I think the unavailability, the turbulence of it all is like, you need some semblance of stability there.
Mhm.
But where I keep coming back to is, at what point that, like, even peak, like, look at what he did last year before he was injured in that playoff game. That was like Zion. That was peak Zion on defense too. Because I know you mentioned there are defensive concerns, but like, we had an extended stretch ever since the midseason tournament, which was not known as the Emirates Cup by that point. Like, he was just locked in a way that we hadn't seen before. But the team still wasn't built to optimize him. I'm not saying he was thriving in spite of them, because they still gave him the keys of the offense. But you're talking about, you mentioned that he's a very unique, specific fit. I don't disagree with you, but is that breaking news?
No, but I mean, that's been my concern, like, from the jump almost. Like, it's not breaking news, but nobody has. So maybe I'll put it to you this way. And it's kind of rhetorical because we've talked about it, but like, what is the type of team you put around Zion Williamson if healthy? Like, what is it? Just 5-out shooters, defenders?
Yes. And they've never done that, which is just so, like, even there, he put, like, look at the center position as sort of the barometer for this. He's played with, like, of the most notable, like, they've had Steven Adams, they've had Jonas Valanciunas, and now they have, like, who the fuck ever. Like, it's just, yeah, we've seen like great moments from Yves Missi, and then Daniel Tice is on there. So this season they come into, was that their idea of like, well, now we're finally going to lean into this smaller, versatile style. But here's where I diverge. And so this year there's a lot of noise caked in, but ever since Zion was drafted, Grant, they have ranked better than 23rd in 3-point attempt rate only once. Yeah. That was in 2019, 2020. And so ever since then, like, they've just hovered consistently, mostly in the bottom 5, but really around the bottom 7. And even when you get into personnel specific, and let's look at last year. So during the minutes that he played with CJ McCollum and Trey Murphy, so just those two, because those were clearly their two best. Jordan Hawkins didn't have a huge role. And when you're looking at 3-point volume, like, those are the guys who could get it up. Those lineups with Zion plus their two best shooters still ranked in the 32nd percentile of 3-point volume. So you have never assembled the type of team that is going to adequately, even if you think there's space in the floor, it's, oh, we have Larry Nance and Herb Jones is hitting his threes. Okay, awesome. You have never once modeled your offense to a T like it was built to exist around Zion. And I don't know who this isn't. Is that Willie Green's fault? Is it David Griffin's fault? Is it Zion's body's fault? Because did the Pelicans feel like, look, even entering this season, okay, they downsized, definitely felt more dynamic on offense, but they weren't necessarily built. I mean, we're seeing it now. Like, they weren't built. I mean, Trey Murphy and CJ McCollum with Jordan Hawkins, they weren't all available at once, but the 3-point volume has been just ridiculously low. Once again, you never built your team in the image like Zion was your tentpole. And I guess, do you attribute that to because they felt like they couldn't? And so they were constantly trying to toe the line of, all right, we need to be at a point where, yes, Zion can be peak Zion with this group and will still be really good. We also need to figure out a way to exist without him. I want to know your answer, but my pushback would be, when have they had that rollicking playoff series against the Suns. Like, if you're going to go into, when was Brandon Ingram just like this incredible central, and this, I'm not insulting Brandon Ingram here. It's just, when did Brandon Ingram ever look like, okay, well, that's just someone who is going to run the show when Zion misses his 20 to 30 games a year, whatever it might be, more than that. So did you ever, even if they were trying to straddle the line, I guess is my question, did they even build a team that made sense conceptually to do that?
That's really interesting. I think my first thought is, I wonder if, and you brought it up as one of the like possible explanations, has the front office just decided, like, we can't build around this guy, we can't build this custom fitted, bespoke kind of roster for Zion he would need to be optimized, right? Like, we can't do it because we don't know if he's going to be there. So we have to sort of otherwise kind of make an effort to build like a quote unquote normal team. But then, like, the pushback against that is, like, you sort of haven't, because normal teams shoot more threes, and normal, you know what I mean? Like, they haven't really done either. They absolutely have not put the theoretical best possible roster around him. I think Brandon Ingram is sort of like the representative of that. Like, oh, these two stars don't fit together. It's not just that Ingram isn't a good fit. It's that it's really hard to find a good fit for Zion. Like everybody wants 3-and-D players at the other 4 positions. So like that's part of it. But I just, yeah, I can't argue with you. They haven't built the right kind of team around him. I'm hesitant to like really pile on though, because if you look at, okay, he gave us 24 games as a rookie. I think if you were going to do it, if there was a moment where you were going to build the optimal team around him, it would have had to happen at some point in his second year where he's showing you, I'm the guy. Look at, and they put the ball in his hands like way more frequently during that second year. And that's when he really exploded. And you could see the vision of what a Zion Williamson centric team could look like. And then he missed the entire next season. So like there was a tiny window where I think the Pelicans would have been justified in having confidence that they could build around this guy and make the roster decisions that were necessary to maximize him. And that window shut when he missed all of 21-22 and then played 29 games the following year. And at that point, well, maybe you don't pay him what they paid him, although they did get some incentives into that contract. So that, or some, well, I don't know what you would call them, but like the weight clauses and stuff, protections. Yeah. So I'm inclined to give New Orleans like a little, not a pass, but like I can understand why you didn't go full bore. Let's trade everything we have to surround him with spacing, defense, whatever. Cause like, and you know what? They might've been right, because here we are, and we're both saying, well, you can't trust him as a guy to build around anymore. That said, you kind of wasted half a decade of your franchise by not trying it, but still, that's not really an answer. That's just kind of my like trying to understand the Pelicans side of it, which may not be a popular position.
I guess I can't understand the Pelican side of it as well, because I do think you're right. Like the specificity of his fit and what you would need around him to optimize him, coupled with, okay, the injury history, it didn't make it difficult on them. But I just, looking at the theory of these teams, it feels like a run of, is half measures the word, to where like even the DeJounte Murray trade, which we both liked, I think that's someone that could have been involved in more 2-man actions with Zion than necessarily a Brandon Ingram, who, credit to Brandon Ingram, his 3-point attempts are up this year. That's what we've been calling for like 3 or 4 years. And we've seen him put up more threes in the past, which is why it was so infuriating. But like it was DeJounte Murray, like it was sub all-star level. This team has been, and you could argue they've never been good or healthy enough to say, well, we're just going to go balls to the wall and cash in all our assets and go into the tax. At the same time, you need to, I guess I struggle to see what their theory ever was then, because it felt like, okay, we're not willing to go all in on this guy. Okay, fine. But then you built teams,
right,
plural, that didn't make sense with him as the number 2, the number, whatever you viewed him, that didn't make sense as, well, we're trying to be good independent of Zion, or with Zion as this star complement. And it does seem like they were trying to go towards the latter, because it took a while on a couple occasions for them to recognize, like, oh no, Zion needs the ball. That's when we're at our best. And the amount of times, that we discussed that, well, why isn't, until they got there, just leads me to believe that, okay, they were trying to do the kind of straddle the two existences where he's still the star, but they're just better from a macro perspective. And if that's the route you're going to go, I'm not saying it's easy, but you're going to need to point me to the move that made the most sense in the image of that team that they were trying to build. Then
it's basically, I would point to 2: drafting Trey Murphy and drafting Jordan Hawkins. Like there's 2 that like, got it. That works.
Here's my issue with that. Those 2 guys, barring injuries, weren't going to start.
That right. Because, well, and that's because to build on, like, we like the Murray trade, but like, I don't know. Like that's not,
I love like the Murray trade. I want to be clear. I thought it was just good. But value. Like, McCollum is not a great fit. We've talked about Ingram's not a great fit. Jonas Valanciunas is just like in the way, like you're right. Like they have made moves that are almost like, you would almost say like, these are like the opposite of trying to get the best version of this Zion led team, trying to find it. Right. Because like McCollum doesn't defend and he wants to shoot off the dribble. Great 3-point shooter too. But like, that's just, you just need more Trey Murphy types, I guess, or like Mikal Bridges types, or just like the kind of player that everybody wants. And they've got guys that are way far off of that, prototype, right? Yeah. And I guess then it comes back to, though, okay, is it, I view it through the lens of the big man situation specifically, because were there only like 3 to 5 bigs that would have ever, like, it's Kristaps Porzingis, it's Brook Lopez, it's not
Turner.
this version of Miles Turner, but like
Mhm.
they were trying to trade for him, or they were linked to him for how many seasons, and then
Mhm.
after that it's okay, like they were never going to get Chet Holmgren. Yeah, Chet Holmgren works, but I also just kind of wonder, like, could you have gone a route where, like, should they have been a team that was really more in, like, seeing what's up with Karl Anthony Towns? Okay, like the defense would, but like
Mhm.
that's someone who fits a lot. So did they not branch out enough from this? Because it does feel like they were, because even I think you could have gone with more of a vertical threat to where that was never Valanciunas kind of ground bound. Steven Adams, ground bound, very physical. But like a Jared Allen was the name that I think, I don't even know if the Pelicans were linked to them so much as their fans and analysts were smart enough to mention him, but like they never went that route to where it was,
Mhm.
let's get a more dynamic center who's either going to make quick decisions or he's just going to be able, we could run a bunch of inverted pick and rolls then, or not invert, but dual big pick and rolls, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I just, the more I think about it is, yes, this is Zion's availability is a problem. The uniqueness, we'll call it, of a skill set, or the tough to fit aspect of a skill set, a problem. But I honestly think it's a larger issue that when you go back and look, and even feeling in the moment, we felt, and everyone knows I'm higher on the Pelicans than most traditionally. You go back and you look, and it's, well, they never committed to like giving their team around Zion its macro identity. To even when it was like all Zion, it wasn't necessarily optimized to be all Zion. And then when it wasn't all Zion, it was never maximized to be that either. And I just don't know how, like, I don't know. There's more than one party to blame here. It's so
Mhm.
complicated. But my question to you now is, Grant, we've recognized that you can't, like, he's not the guy. Like, because he can't be. Is he the guy at his peak and healthy? Maybe, but he's never going to be at his peak and healthy long enough. That's not the assumption. That is just the facts that we know now. So you're the Pelicans. Where do you go from here?
Well, I mean, your options are, you got three options. One, trade Zion. I mean, that's just like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the market is. I don't know what a reasonable asking price is. Two is you start trying to trade other people. Like, I guess you'd look at Ingram first, and that's, since this contract status being what it is, and that's been part of the rumor mill forever. And I guess, like, what, three is you just wait and you hope that all these guys come back and you try to get a really good look at this specific team in, let's say it takes 6 weeks for Zion to be back. And that kind of lines up, you'll have Murphy, maybe that gives you a window before it's too late in a difficult West to, like, be above the play-in fray. A trade is fascinating, and it's really interesting to think about, like, all the other pieces on this team with somebody else or a bunch of picks and flexibility, I guess. You gotta have a massive salary coming back to make the money match, obviously. Um, I hate this, but, like, personally, I think I wait it out. I think you gotta just, the Ingram, clock is ticking, obviously, because you risk losing him in free agency.
Mhm.
But I think, you made some significant move. You bring Murray in, like, you give Trey Murphy the money. You paid Herb Jones last summer, or two, anyway, like that. We haven't even mentioned Herb Jones. I felt obliged to mention him.
Also injured.
Yeah, just assume they're injured. Shoulder injury for Herb, like, of course. Freak injury too. It's not just like the Zion, oh, you can't stay healthy. It's like Pajemski dove on Herb Jones's shoulder.
Jose Alvarado now injured too. Hits
I'll-
keep coming.
It's ridiculous. I think I wait. And if we get through this season and it's the status quo, like Zion's not healthy again, or it's clear the fit isn't there, then maybe you start thinking drastically. It's just hard for me to see trading Zion, which is an option, I guess, as like the cleanest way to go, at least right now.
I would say I'm going to explain to you why you're wrong.
Okay.
I'm just enough. I wouldn't trade Zion just because I don't know what the value would be. I mean, it would be interesting if you just said to Milwaukee, we'll give you Zion and the picks back that we control. So the top 4 of this year. So they could tank if they wanted to. And then I think they have control over their next 2. Would you give us Giannis if Giannis like that? But I think the move needs to be like, this is a gap year. This year is done. Prioritize drumming up your lottery odds. And you have Zion mostly because his value might be at its nadir or so complicated. You have Trey Murphy, you have Herb Jones. Everyone else is expendable. Get what you can for them so that you're not tempted to run this back together. Because look, this team isn't going to pay the tax. They are $30 million under the tax next year, committed to 10 players. That's not, most notably, including Brandon Ingram's
Mhm.
next deal. And so at the bare minimum, I think you move on from him to get what you, and I think Brandon Ingram's a good player. I think he's done some adjusting this year, but it's time to be bad this year on purpose. Give up on this year, get rid of players, get what you can for them. I know that we're not big sellers for seller's sake, but Brandon Ingram is going into free agency. So do you want to call his bluff? And like, is he not going to get paid anything in free agency? That would be quite the gamble. And then you reevaluate over the offseason when you see who you wind up with in the draft. And if you're serious about Zion being the 1, the 2, the 3, then you got to consider actually moving that pick for someone who makes a semblance of sense with whatever team you're trying to build right now. And so I think this year needs to be about that. And then they can go through the Zion existential crisis of it all a little bit more over the offseason.
I think that's right. And I would just acknowledge how bizarre / concerning it is that we're looking at 25, 26. That's when we're going to that'll be Zion's 7th year in the NBA. Like, as we're just trying to get started with the right team around him. If you hang, like, that's like, that's the better part of a decade at that point that the Pelicans will have been trying and failing to like figure it out, which is, yeah. I mean, if you've struggled for that long, it's hard to be optimistic you're going to solve it, in the last 3 years of the decade. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope it wasn't too bleak. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. If you're checking us out on YouTube, if you are checking us out on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed, that you've thumbs up all of our content, that you're leaving comments. That really helps the algorithm like us back. And wherever you're listening to this, make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, 5 stars, telling friends, telling enemies, all that good stuff. Join our Discord. Links for that in YouTube and podcast description. That's going to do it. We'll be back with you again, recording later this week to go up shortly after that. Close as always. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.